Welcome, everybody, to Sherdog.com. It's your man, Ant Walker. I'm hosting today Off the Chain, the discussion show, the panel show, where we take some of Sherdog's best and brightest, put them in the same room, technically, through the magic of Skype, and we talk about stuff. So let's go ahead and introduce our panel. As always, we have the senior editor of Sherdog.com, Ben Duffy. Ben, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing great. Excited to break down what happened last weekend and what's happening this weekend.
All right. Of course, we have the resident stat expert, Jay Pettry. Jay, what's going on, my brother?
Hey guys, how you doing? Looking forward to talking about all the things that are coming our way, and we might talk about this later. But I just want to pour one out to Pernell Whitaker. I'm really sad about that. Sweet Pea, rest in peace.
R.I.P. Sweet Pea. Definitely my favorite boxer growing up. So definitely want to make sure we pay respect to one of the greatest that's ever laced up a pair of gloves. And the fourth chair is occupied by the first returning fourth man, a very special man. Got the chance to hang out with him in Vegas about a week and a half ago. Time of my life. You know him as Sherdog's business expert. I know him as the guy with the flyest haircut on the panel today. Auger, Patrick, how are you doing today, my man?
I'm doing good. I'm honored to be the first returning guest. I mean, it's a great honor. I'm so proud and happy. I've already won. So
winning at life, man. Winning at life. Winning at the barbershop as well. Kudos to all your victories, sir. All right, so we had a busy weekend in mixed martial arts, as we tend to have, and the main story of the day was UFC Sacramento. Featured a lot of Team Alpha Male. However, we'll get to that. But the first thing that we have to talk about is the main event. Germaine de Randamie knocks out Aspen Ladd in 16 seconds. We will talk about the knockout itself. Whether we like the stoppage or not. But let's first start off with the state of the women's bantamweight division. I'll start with you, Pat. Now that GDR has gotten this knockout over a previously undefeated prospect in Aspen Ladd, what do you think is next for the division?
Honestly, I think what's next for the division is both the number one contender in that division and the champion going up to 145 and scrapping it out there. I mean, GDR never technically lost her featherweight belt. It was taken from her, and Nunes is the champ. And at this point, for the rest of the division itself, you got Caitlin Vera, and that's about it. I can't think of anyone else at the top of my head in bantamweight who's deserving of another title shot. No one above GDR, and you could run GDR Nunes at bantamweight, but again, at this point, have them fight in the weight class that's a little bit more enticing, since Nunes has already beaten GDR once in 135. They can go up to featherweight and see what happens. That's what I say.
All right. Jay, do you agree with that?
No, and here's why. Run it back. You got we'll discuss this in a little bit, but the nature of the stoppage, you have to run it back. And I think you need to run it back because the division has a lot of issues and a very few clear-cut contenders. You have Caitlin Vieira, and my silence is to indicate what else is there. So, I mean, I respect de Randamie, and she's done what she's done in the division, but Aspen Ladd is by far her biggest win. It's not even close. Her best win before was Rocky Pennington, who came in like 3 pounds overweight. And then, all love to Julie Kedzie, but Julie Kedzie at the end of her career. So she was the number one bantamweight because Holly Holm was number 2 bantamweight. So that kind of says the state of the division. I mean, if not, do Vieira versus de Randamie, because Nunes needs to go up to 145 and handle the Cyborg Spencer mess. It's only been about two and change years. I'm still not confident enough for de Randamie to fight for a title again, given what happened.
Okay. Well, Ben, so tell me, what do you think should be next? I like to think that Pat has a good point here about making the GDR versus Nunes fight at featherweight. Of course, my reasons are a bit different, but Ben, let's hear your take on that.
I actually wrote the matches to make piece for the site after UFC Fight Night 155. It ran on Sunday, and I argued that de Randamie should get the next shot at Nunes at whichever weight class. The UFC has options there. What I actually think would be ideal would be for Nunes to, if they don't run it back immediately, they could certainly do that. But either let her hold tight and take on the winner of the Cyborg versus Spencer fight at 145, and then take on the winner of the Landsberg versus Macy Chasson fight, because they're fighting in September. So the winner of that fight, if they're not dinged up too bad, could be ready to go by the end of the year. And then you have Nunes's itinerary through the end of 2019 kind of set up in two divisions where it's sometimes hard to come up with credible challengers on the spot. So that would be my call.
Okay. So one thing that I didn't give consideration to the idea that GDR was the featherweight champion that didn't lose the belt in the cage, and that's definitely something worth considering. But I know I alluded to this last week, but I really want to see Amanda Nunes defend featherweight next, just as a way to cement the fact that she is the greatest female fighter in mixed martial arts history, and also to actually give a complete sense of a true champ, someone who has defended both belts. I don't think we've seen that since maybe David Branch in World Series of Fighting, and Dan Henderson before that in Pride. So that's really what I'm looking at for this next. But
I'm sorry for jumping in, but did Hendo even defend the heavier belt in Pride? Because I thought he took it from Vanderlei right before.
No, he attempted to unify. So
okay.
So at least there's the considerate, like he went in there as the champion with the lineal rights to that belt on the line. So in that sense, yes. But as of now, Amanda Nunes has the opportunity to make history in the UFC in that manner. So yeah, let's see what's going on with Cyborg and Felicia Spencer. But I think GDR has made a very good case for herself to insert herself into the featherweight conversation. But speaking of the difference between featherweight and bantamweight, let's talk about these weight cuts because Aspen Ladd looked terrible on the scale the day before this fight. Somehow or another, the commission allowed this to happen, and she herself said that she felt fine a couple hours later. But I mean, tell me, Jay, how would you have handled this situation?
Maybe I'm reactionary, and that's okay. I'll be contrarian today. Pull the fight. The girl could not stand up on her own. The commission shouted, "Get some water," as he's holding her arm because she's shaking almost uncontrollably. The commission doctor, and I'm sure you guys all saw this, and I'm going to say these words that I'll never say again, said that she was safe because she had moist mucous membranes. And because of that, she was cleared to her hydration levels, whatever they may be, were acceptable. And she was shaking because she was nervous and not because of her health. Seriously. Look, I'm not a doctor. I play one on TV, but it doesn't make sense what they did there. Ladd herself said she was going to go down to 135 because she missed weight before. I don't know if you guys noticed that. It was a kind of a strange thing. She forced her way down. She could have gone 136 and taken that 1 pound. She said, no, I'm going to make 135 because reasons. And fighter safety has to just be a factor. California is trying to lead the way on this weight cut situation. That is a statement. You have Urijah Faber. He can headline at home. Look what he did. It would have been perfectly reasonable to end the night that way. But just stop. We have to stop. If our best alternative is one championship, we have to stop and reassess for a minute.
All right. Ben, so give me your take on this. How would you have handled this situation? Like, what do you see as possible solutions to a problem like this?
If I were her promoter, I would be telling her to move up a weight class. I mean, this is not the first time she's looked miserable on the scale. She looked miserable in the Evinger fight. Not as miserable, but she, again, was like visibly shaking and barely able to walk. As a 24-year-old, incredibly focused and athletically gifted woman, she was able to rehydrate to the point that she performed fine against Evinger. And if not for the weird call against Durandamy, who knows, may have performed fine there as well. But this isn't a sustainable thing going forward. And this was a an 8-week turnaround between camps, during which her Instagram was loaded with pictures of her like hiking in the mountains and doing shit. I think she took a hard weight cut on a short turnaround fight, like relatively short turnaround fight. Yeah, I mean, I'd be trying to force her to move up. And the funny thing is, if she'd moved up to featherweight after the Evinger fight, she probably would have had a title shot at featherweight already.
Hands down.
So I feel funny saying this because we're probably going to talk about a couple of iffy stoppages tonight, and I'm the guy that's arguing for the person to take 2 or 3 more undefended shots to the face, just so we're all sure. But I do care about fighter safety. and it's just so inconsistent. I mean, we have New York that won't even let someone try to make weight based on how they looked, from an external exam from X number of feet away, that we've experienced fairly recently. And then we have California testing the mucous membranes and clearing her to go on. Yeah.
I find this pretty interesting that this did take place in California. California being one of the more progressive states when it comes to weight cutting. I remember at UFC 214, Aljamain Sterling and Renan Barão took place at a catch weight because the commission would not allow Barão to fight at 135. And I was also there at UFC 229 when Aspen Ladd fought Tanya Evinger, and seeing her on the scale, and I'm not quite sure if the videos replaying this captured the real mood in the room. It was frightening to see her stand on that scale, shaking, shivering, and clearly unhealthy. No way that you want your body to be a day before you go in there to get into a cage fight. So Pat, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on this one, or if you agree with me here at all. I mean, Aspen Ladd it wouldn't exactly be the biggest featherweight. She's not the biggest bantamweight. Is this a matter of just poor weight management? Or what do you think the problem is?
I don't know. I don't know that it's poor weight management. I honestly can't tell you, because especially I think Ben kind of hit the nail on the head with it being a quicker turnaround than normal and a tough weight cut. And I think they let her go on because I rewatched that 229 video, and yeah, she's shaking. She's looking not as bad as she did this time, but still pretty awful. And then she turned around and she dominated Evinger. She beat the shit out of her. So it's hard to say, when a doctor's saying, hey, mucous membranes are good, we don't know none of us are doctors. None of us know how reliable that is, or if they're just BSing. So that's hard to say. In terms of why she seems to have a problem, I think part of it is she's trying to be as big as possible. She thinks she's young enough that she can make those tough weight cuts, but it's not working. Clearly not. I mean, at this point, I would say either make her move up or really just get in the UFC PI or get some different camp or some type of nutrition coach going and drop some extra weight and see how that goes. I mean, it's not. I don't think that she's already putting herself to the max, so I think she could easily clear 135 if she was willing to sacrifice some muscle. But the question is she really willing to do that? Because yeah, featherweight, I don't think she does anything against Cyborg or Nunes or GDR even, honestly. Because yeah, she's not the biggest, bantamweight. I don't think she's going to be a huge featherweight at all.
Yeah. All right, so now let's address Ben Duffy's insatiable bloodlust as we ponder the stoppages of UFC Sacramento, primarily in the main event between GDR and Aspen Ladd. So, buy or sell, Ben, was Herb Dean's stoppage of Durandamy and Ladd worse than the stoppage of Askren versus Lawler?
Sell. It was a bad stoppage. I was on a podcast like an hour after the show ended, and I probably watched it like 6 or 7 times in between because from different angles, you never know what the referee might have seen that you didn't. The referee, if they're doing their job and they're right on top of the action, might see the eyes roll up in the head in a way that the 10,000 people in the seats don't. I still think it was a bad stoppage, but Askren and Lawler was worse, and this is why, and I'll do it as quickly as possible. When there's a bad stoppage, I mean, objectively, that's a bad stoppage, and on some level, they're all equal. But subjectively, what was going to happen next? I think if GDR and Ladd had played out for another 5 to 10 seconds, there's a good chance that Geronimo's right on top of her, and she just throws a couple coffin nails on Ladd as she's grabbing a desperation single. The Askren versus Lawler fight, they get stopped while Askren has Lawler in like a bulldog choke. I mean, Askren had already been tombstone piledrivered once in that fight. I mean, my thought is Lawler gets out of there, and maybe he wins or maybe he loses, but it was anybody's fight from there. So that's still the worst stoppage.
All right. Well, Jay, tell me, do you agree with Ben?
Yes, I do. I've seen the Askren Lawler, the Terminator thumbs up so many times to just drive me crazy to see Herb Dean grabs Robbie Lawler's hand, lets it go. Robbie goes like this, and he calls the fight. It's a microsecond exchange. It's not a very quick one, but this was a bad stoppage. I've seen the angles. I've seen whatever's going on, and yes, I agree to an extent that we can look at the fight and say, well, probably would have happened next. She probably would have swarmed her, elbowed her face off, whatever may have happened, but we don't know. We've seen crazy stuff happen. We've seen scrambles. We've seen surviving. We've seen all kinds of stuff. We saw Askren's his circuits get scrambled, and then he survives and does a big breath choke. So anything could have happened. I always want to err on the side of that, but I already have said fighter safety has to matter, so it does have to matter. It's the kind of thing where you look at refs and I feel for Herb Dean. I really do, because this is the kind of lightning quick call that you're going to get dumped on no matter what you do. If you stop it late, it should have been stopped before. Why did you let her go? She was on all fours looking over there into space. Or, you let it go too long, she's all a mess. So it's the kind of thing that, as long as there's consistency, if he's going to stop the fight early every time, okay. All right, then we got Herb Early Dean. Okay. But he isn't always. Because I don't know if you guys remember Mertzalayev, CB Dalloway. And Mertzalayev is ruining Dalloway. Dalloway is on the ground, laying on his side. You could almost hear him fake snoring to try and pretend that he's out. And Herb Dean's watching it happen, as if CB Dalloway owed Herb Dean money. It was the kind of stoppage that didn't happen the level of Pat Curran and Joe Warren. You go, oh my God. So you almost want to take him to school or something, have him go to John McCarthy's reffing school just for a refresher course.
All right. So now, Pat, I think that the Askren Lawler stoppage wasn't really that bad. I think it was just more of bad circumstances, kind of creating a weird situation. From my vantage point, being at press row for that one, it looked like Lawler went out. It looked like he went out, and that was the fight, in my opinion. So I think that the Ladd stoppage was worse than the Askren Lawler stoppage. Now, Pat, please tell me, do you agree with them, or are you wrong?
Well, here's the thing. I'm right, and no one else here seems to be right either, apparently. So let me break it down. Jay almost alluded to it a little bit. The Lawler Askren stoppage is worse, but the reason why is because in that fight it shows Herb Dean's inconsistency. Because after Askren gets slammed on his head, he's lying there, and Lawler unloads 5 shots unanswered to Askren's head. Askren isn't even defending them. He's just eating them in the head, and Herb is just looking at him like, what's going on? And then lets him find out. Obviously we know what happens there, and I do agree that in that moment where, Herb didn't really have a good vantage point, he tried to grab the arm, but and who knows what Lawler was doing, whether or not he was playing fake or whatever. It really seemed like he wasn't out, but you could understand why maybe he made that, misstep. But then we fast forward to the Aspen GDR fight. 1 shot and Ladd is down, and he's just, that's it. Oh, we got to stop that. Like, how are you going to let Askren eat 5 shots to the head, and then you're going to have Ladd take 1 where she then, clearly seemed to be defending herself. She's okay. I mean, in my opinion, Herb needs to, I don't know, again, go to school or something, because there's some issues. But that Lawler Askren fight is terrible because it just shows in one fight his ridiculous inconsistency.
Well, that is your 2019 referee of the year. just dusting that award off from the Fighters Awards show. What was that? What, 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago, yeah.
Right. So interesting there. Yeah, Pat, we had a great time at that ceremony, but that's another story for another day. Let's continue talking about UFC Sacramento, because the biggest story from this, of course, was the return of Urijah Faber, who stunningly had a 46-second knockout over a very highly touted prospect in Ricky Simone. So now that Faber got this quick knockout, he seems to be, hasn't missed a day since his nearly 3-year layoff, and he says he wants to stick around. What do you see his future being at in the bantamweight division? Pat, I'll start with you.
I think his future is ultimately going to end up being kind of a gatekeeper. I don't know that he can hang with the highest echelon, but I want to see him against Corey Sandhagen next. I think that fight is a real good test for both of them. It's going to really test where Faber's at. It's going to, Sandhagen kind of proved in that Lineker fight. It was a split decision, but he kind of proved he was upper tier. Let's really see where Urijah is at, other than somebody that, Simone got caught. But up until then, I didn't think Faber looked particularly great. I don't think we saw enough that I'm, going to say he looks bad or that he was just rusty. But I really want to see him test against somebody that has a chin and is going to really test him too. And I think Sandhagen's the match. So that's where I see his immediate future. And ultimately, I don't think he gets past the top 5 though. I think Jan, Aljamain, Moraes, I think they all clean his clock.
Yeah. But sure would be nice to have John Lineker around right now, huh? That actually would be a matchup I would love to see right now. But Ben, please tell me, are you in line for this Faber Cejudo campaign? No. How hard are you beating that drum?
No. And the funny thing is, like, Cejudo apparently saw this coming because he was calling out Faber from the time that he beat Marlon Moraes to take the bantamweight belt. He was talking about Faber, and Faber hadn't even said he was coming back yet. So maybe he had some inside information, but he wants Faber. Faber wants him. Neither of them should get what they want. For Faber to be like slotted into a title shot at this point, when you got Aljamain Sterling and Peter Yan just kind of hanging out like in a holding pattern, would be insulting. And I mean, for one, I think Faber would get dusted in that fight. If Faber wants to stick around and take a couple more fights, what he needs are top 10 guys with name and entertainment value that are not immediately in line for a title shot. As you alluded to, John Lineker would have been the perfect matchup. That's not happening because John Lineker is off to who knows what weight in one championship. But Patrick talked about Corey Sandhagen. Sandhagen's got a job to do first. He is fighting Rafael Assunção next month. In my matches to make after Saturday's card, I said Urijah Faber should get the winner of Assunção versus Sandhagen. It's a win-win. If Assunção wins, then Faber gets to fight a guy who is on the border of the top 5, but he already has a win against. He beat him in the little blue cage 10 years ago. They're both very different fighters since then. And, Faber is now 40. Assunção is now, 35 or something. It would be a whole different fight. I'd love to see it. Sandhagen would be a fantastic matchup. So, yeah, I want Faber to take a fight like that. No title shot.
All right, so Jay, Sandhagen, the ghost of Lineker, Cejudo, where do you want Urijah Faber to go now?
Well, I liked the Sandhagen Assunção winner. I did, because you got the history of beating Assunção. All these, I'm open to a rematch even after a finish if it's a very long time ago and everybody's changed since then. So that'd be fun. But guys, I'm gonna be the voice of whatever the opposite of reason is today. Faber made almost $400,000 in this fight. He made far and away way more than any other fighter. Emmett was the only one who I think cleared 6 figures, besides maybe a performance bonus, because he made about $1. Emmett made about $150. We know Faber's got the championship contract and all that. And when he retires, it's frozen, so he just picked up where he left off. They're going to give Faber the title shot. And this is I'm going to give a spoiler alert because this is going to tie into something I'm going to talk about later. But it just, what they're going to do with Faber now, the way they're pathing his trajectory, just has all sights on title shot. Something I picked up on is that Ricky Simone, about, I don't know, a month before this fight, so we knew it was happening. It was announced. It was Faber's going to come back in Sacramento. Ricky Simone suddenly and unexpectedly is the number 15 bantamweight in the world. He wasn't before then. He hadn't fought since February. So after he beat Hani Yahya, he wasn't ranked. It was Thomas Almeida, who hasn't fought since January. So suddenly Faber's back in the mix. He's going to fight Simone. Now he's ranked. Nothing has happened at all. Neither guy is fighting. Almeida, they're just doing their own thing. And now it's a ranked opponent for Faber to beat. Faber's beating a top 15 guy. When he left the rankings list on Sherdog, he was number 6. Now it's 2.5 years ago. The game has moved on, of course, but he was still a top 10 guy on Sherdog. And we like our ranking system because we put a lot of thought into it. The only guys that have beaten him are Dominic Cruz, Frankie Edgar, Jimmy Rivera, and Killing Spree, Renan Barão. So I feel like this is the moment where they can stop and go, okay, cool. We have 2 good contenders in Aljo and Jan. Let's make a fight. Let's do the Faber thing and move on with it.
You know, let me throw an idea out there, gentlemen. What do you think about Faber Cruz 4? We're not down with that anymore.
I don't know.
Cruz is out until the end of the year, at least, though.
Well, it'll keep both of them out of undeserved title shots. That's kind of the angle I'm playing with this. I'd like to see Aljamain Sterling or Peter Yan get the next shot at the bantamweight title. And if you keep Cruz and Faber busy with each other, we don't have to worry about them being inserted into the title picture. So
then the winner will get a title shot.
Well, at least
Cruz versus Faber 4, get a room.
If they fight again, you know the winner is going to get a title shot.
100%.
Of course. Like, we know that, but at least then we can trace it to something even remotely legitimate. And I use the word legitimate lightly.
I mean, at least it's not Hendo Bisbing, right? Like, I mean,
right.
I love Hendo, but come on, and Bisbing.
Well, I mean, at least in the Hendo Bisbing case, Hendo was coming off of a very good win.
Right.
So,
he was only 2-6.
Beat the man a long time
struggling
ago.
in that match before, but yeah, it was a great win.
Yeah. So there's that. So yeah, toast to legitimate rankings. All right, gentlemen, let's go ahead and talk about another Team Alpha Male fight on the card. And of course, this is one that Team Alpha Male did not win. They went 4-2 for the evening. And one of those 2 defeats was against Ryan Hall, who took on Darren Elkins. I am of the opinion that this was perhaps the best bad fight that I've ever seen. I loved it for all of its weirdness, for every little strange thing that it was. So Jay, am I on an island here? Was Ryan Hall, Darren Elkins so bad that it was good?
Let me tell you, I'm really happy to finally be on the side of correct tonight. Yes, I loved the fight. I legitimately, when I wrote a couple things on Twitter, it sounded like I was ripping on it because whatever, but I legitimately enjoy that fight for all of its absurdity. It's remember how last week I laughed about how nuts the knockout was just because of everything that went into it, just how absurd it was. This was the absurd moment. This was the what is happening in this world. Ryan Hall goes for a slow right hand and drops Darren Elkins. What is happening? He's oh God, some really wise guy said that Hall was throwing spinning kicks like they were jabs.
That actually was me. That was me. That was a wise man indeed. Continue, please, Jay. You're right already. Continue.
And I mean, really, he was channeling his own inner Van Damme. Like he was landing shots that shouldn't have been even close. I don't know what happened. Like I very comically said before the fight, if damage takes any damage in this fight, he's done something horribly wrong. I mean, there was something on Reddit that I saw this morning, and it was like, I don't know if you guys have seen it yet. It's a GIF of all of Ryan Hall's wins in UFC and Tough. At the end of the fight, he gets his hand raised and goes. He looks at it like Jim from The Office. He does and it's just kind of indicative of everything. And one last thing is that I might steal a point from somebody else, but why the heck did they not interview him after the fight? They interviewed Pena after a significantly worse fight, but they skipped Hall. Market him. Market whatever he brings to the table. He's a unique figure in the community. Give him some shine.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I did see a little pushback when I tweeted a similar sentiment about the lost opportunity in interviewing Ryan Hall, and one of the tweets that came back my way was like, "Well, he doesn't give good interviews. Have you ever heard of Mark Hunt?" You know, you don't have to give necessarily the classic good interview to be a compelling personality, and I think Ryan Hall checks that box. So, before because definitely Pat and Ben, I want your thoughts on this fight, but let's just take a look back at what Ryan Hall's record has been in the UFC. He's undefeated, standing at 4-0 under the promotional banner. Artem Lobov, Gray Maynard, BJ Penn, Darren Elkins. Such an odd mix of names that are legitimate but aren't at the same time. So Pat, tell me, what do you think should be next for Ryan Hall?
I mean, it's hard to say what's next for Ryan Hall. I mean,
Kron.
so what? What was
Kron.
that? Kron, Kron?
Are they finalizing the Cub Swanson fight? Though,
yes.
For Kron, okay.
So that's hard to say. But here's the thing about Darren the Damage Elkins is if you expect him to go into a fight and not take copious amounts of damage, no matter who he is fighting, then you have not watched enough of his bouts. That man, I love watching him fight purely because he somehow finds a way, even in the Hall fight. He looked like he got knocked down, looked like that choke was in, and he somehow found a way out. Now he didn't turn it around and win, but he looks like your neighbor decided to go ahead and go to the gym for a couple weeks and then get in an octagon, and yet he pulls off crazy wins. He was on a 6-fight win streak. It's insane. At this point, he basically was a good stepping stone for Hall, because let's face it, in terms of who Hall has faced, he'd been coming off a long layoff. He fought BJ, but BJ is a ghost of himself. Elkins was ranked in the top 15 not that long ago. So that is a good step up. I think next he gets a ranked opponent. As to who, I can't really say. I mean, looking at the rankings, I would say, maybe. I mean, this might be too much for him, but I would kind of love to see, especially with all the spinning shit he threw, I would kind of love to see Song Yadong versus Ryan Hall. But I feel like Yadong would probably murder him, but I feel that'd be super fun to watch. I don't know. That's my vote.
Wow, that's I didn't even think of that matchup.
That's a good one.
So the one that came to mind for me, and I got to give credit to Casey over at MMA Fighting for putting this one in my head there. Jeremy Stephens. That is the one that I really would like to see. I think that'd be a very interesting style matchup. Ben, please tell me, do you agree with any of these picks for Ryan Hall's next opponent? And what were your overall thoughts on the fight?
I won't spend too much time going back over the same ground that Jay has covered so ably. I love the fight. I think Ryan Hall is hilarious. I root for his kind of weird approach to the game to work out for him. Like, it's something we need more of in the ultra serious world of cage fighting. Since the UFC has kind of abandoned the mantra of winners fight winners and losers fight losers in the wake of Joe Silva's departure, I would be fine with him fighting Jeremy Stephens. Stephens is coming off of 2 losses, while Hall is essentially undefeated in his pro career. I mean, he lost a one-off fight like 5 years before he even bothered to come back to MMA. But for all effective purposes, he's undefeated since he really decided to start taking MMA seriously. Nonetheless, I'd be happy to see him fight Jeremy Stephens. I'd also be happy to see him fight Moicano, who is coming off 2 straight losses. Either of those would be great. Those are guys who should bust him up on the feet, but Darren Elkins should have as well. And Carnero in particular is somebody that can handle himself on the ground, but that's no guarantee that Ryan Hall isn't going to make you look stupid with an Imanari roll. So I'd love to see either of those. He does need to move up. I mean, he needs to keep moving up until somebody can stop the weird shit he's serving us. And I'm here for it.
Also, quick note: I'm an idiot because Song Yadong is a bantamweight. So that's I would still love to see that fight, but
Yadong is heavier than you gave it credit for.
That's yeah. But
be proud of yourself, Pat. Be proud.
I mean, Shane Burgos. That's who I'd say instead. I think that's a good fight.
All right. I'm not mad at it at all. The possibilities are endless with Ryan Hall. Must see TV either way you slice it. Okay, so another big event that took place over the weekend was Bellator 224. Julia Budd knocked out her opponent in the very first round. So now Cyborg brought up she had an interesting tweet saying that the Bellator featherweight division is far better than what the UFC has to offer. So, Jay, I want to get your reaction to that tweet and tell me, what do these promotions do with the featherweight division as a whole?
Well, I mean, numerically, not statistically, numerically, she's right, because there are a lot more of them. I mean, there's maybe on the best of days when people have taken some really heavy lunges, there's 8 featherweights in the UFC. So, and then most of them have bailed. A couple of them are from Tough that have dropped out, like Yulia Stoliarenko. I think she's dropping down or has dropped down to bantamweight. So they just don't have many. So Bellator's division is better. There are more opponents. But the problem is there's the Cyborg effect in Bellator. Bud is far and away the best featherweight they have in the company. And the biggest issue that they'll have to face is they have other talent that respect to them, but like a Turkish girl whose name I don't want to demolish is 2-7. So it's hard to really push the division when there are a bunch of 1-2, 2-3, 3-3 girls there. But it's just, that's the state of the division. So what I have been banging this drum since I can remember. The promotions are doing a huge injustice to this weight class because it's so relatively new with only a handful of fighters in it. They need to stop all trying to have one. They need to just say, okay, we're going to step back and let somebody else handle this. Now, this means giving up a possible value. The UFC has 8, Bellator has 12-ish, and Invicta has 14-ish. That's about 30, 32. That's 34. That's about what it takes to build a division, to actually put it together and make it so it can go on for a little longer. If you have 10 girls fighting each other, you're not going to get very far. They need to put that together. But in the meantime, since there's no challenger, nobody that can handle Bud right now in bantamweight and Bellator and featherweight, she called out Gabby Garcia, let her go to Ryzen. Let's do it. Let's get weird.
All right. So Ben, tell me, what do these promotions do with the female featherweight divisions?
I mean, I don't completely disagree with Cyborg. Obviously, she's speaking with a particular angle in mind. She's trying to give herself more leverage against the UFC and just trying to say something a little more sensational and overstated than maybe is the case. But the fact remains that, like, of her reign of terror once she moved from Invicta to the UFC, let's see, of her opponents, Leslie Smith, former bantamweight, Lena Landsberg fights at bantamweight, Tanya Ebinger fights at bantamweight, Holly Holm fights at bantamweight, Yana Kunitskaya fights at bantamweight, Amanda Nunes fights at bantamweight. Literally everybody they fed Cyborg after she came to the UFC was either a former bantamweight or a bantamweight by preference who was just plucked from Invicta to be a victim for Cyborg. Meanwhile, I mean, Bellator at least does have a couple of legitimate featherweights. You know, like buried in the prelims was the Amanda Bell versus Arlene Blencow fight. Neither of those women has ever fought a bantamweight. Those are legit large women. That sounds horrible, but you know what I mean. They're not blown up bantamweights. Unfortunately, she's already beat Bud has already beat Blencow twice.
Yeah.
You know, so that didn't really help anything. I agree with Jay. You know, women's featherweight is kind of like men's heavyweight. How many promotions really have a legitimate heavyweight division right now? One. The UFC has the only one. Bellator's bantamweight division is a light heavyweight dominating a bunch of 40-plus UFC retreads. And it's the same
Fedor.
with featherweight. 40-plus. M1 Global Retreads. I'm saying there's only one promotion that has a heavyweight division with actual prospects moving up and some kind of ladder of contention. And it's the same with featherweight. Like, there's just not enough of a population to achieve kind of a critical mass and get an actual division going. I would love it if there were more cross promotion. The UFC will never do that before hell freezes over. So it is in a tough place. And it does suck that the UFC is basically chopping the heads off of 2 Invicta divisions whenever they need a body for their featherweight division. They've killed Invicta in the last 2 years.
All right, and you know what, Ben, I'm glad you mentioned that, and this gives me the chance to put Pat on the spot, and also gives him the chance to side with the cause of right, the cause of Ant Walker. So this is
love having Pat here.
I do love having Pat here. He's a fantastic man, especially if he agrees with me. So Pat, please tell me if you are siding with me on this one. I have been under the belief for quite some time now that the UFC would be better off co-promoting with Invicta at this point, and simply just sharing talent and having those 2 promotions have a deeper relationship beyond the broadcast deal with UFC Fight Pass. Do you think that is a viable solution to this problem with the featherweights and overall even for the flyweights?
I think that's a grand idea, and on paper it would work beautifully. In practice, I think there are some business aspects where in order for that to happen, I mean, UFC would have to essentially buy Invicta out, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of those conversations have happened and Invicta didn't balk at them, because they're doing better than I think a lot of people realize. I've got some friends in Kansas City. They go to the shows regularly. They know some of the people there. Invicta's doing pretty good, even though the fact that, every champion they have gets called up. I mean, Van Buren just got called up, and she won that one-night tourney. I mean, now they have no bantamweight champion again. It's that keeps happening, but ultimately they get a kickback from that. I am sure of it, and I don't think the UFC is ready to make that move. Just because of their financial issues, because they have a lot of things they're trying to do, in my opinion, which I'll save for a later segment. But I think they're trying to do something in particularly, and they can't buy them out right now. But that being said, I think that is a fantastic idea and would one day love for it to happen, because I think it only elevates all of the women's divisions, and I think it gives featherweight a legitimate depth. That way you can have actual title contention. You can have actual people fighting for the belt that should be, and it gives them more of a what they have now at heavyweight, as Ben was talking about.
So Pat proving not only is he a great person to have a drink with, he's also right. He's a brilliant man. Ben, what do you have to say that possibly can't be smarter than what Pat said, because Pat's the man? Continue.
Well, now I have 2 things to say. I'm going to say the fact that Pat is so fun to have a drink with is the reason why he's on Sherdog staff right now.
Hey.
I met him down at LFA 63 in the middle of nowhere, Texas, a few months back. But if the women's featherweight division is equivalent to men's heavyweight, then the women's lightweight division is equivalent to men's super heavyweight. And I'm completely on board with everything that implies. That's all I want to say.
Oh, man. Gotta love it. Great stuff from the panel here. All right, gentlemen. So we're going to wrap up this particular portion of the show by going into shock and awe. So, gentlemen, I want you to tell me what surprised you the most from the weekend of fights. And by weekend, I mean that kind of loosely, because we did have PFL 4 take place on Thursday. So out of PFL 4, Bellator 224, UFC Sacramento, or any other of the cards that took place, please tell me what surprised you the most, pre-fight, post-fight, the fights themselves. Jay, I'll start with you.
You know, I was trying to be clever and trying to go back to something to be unusual, but I couldn't help myself. Faber getting a knockout. Urijah Faber knocking somebody out. The last time he's knocked somebody out, he has some TKOs from 2006, doctor stoppages, Bibi Fernandez and a name Naoki. Anyway, another name. He made Joe Pearson tap to strikes, and that's TKO and our thing, but it's a submission in my eyes. But it's been a frightfully long time since he's knocked somebody out. The last time, and this is something that you can check out on my Fight Facts piece coming out shortly, hopefully. The last time he knocked any person out on the entire card of UFC Sacramento, there was only one other fighter that was a pro at the time, and that was Ryan Hall in his weird one-off 6 years before he decided to start fighting, one-off fight in 2006. No other fighter on the entire card was even fighting then. So just that's the level of what just happened. I mean, he was a huge underdog, big upset, and to win by knockout, I'm going to go Adam Martin right here real quick, was like a 12-1 situation. So it's just, what on earth was that? He's 40 years old, 2.5-year layoff, and knocks out Ricky Simone at 46 seconds?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mind-blowing stuff there. Pat, give me your shock and awe moment of the weekend.
Well, I was going to take Urijah Faber knocking out Ricky Simone, but Jay just did that. So instead, I'm going to roll with the fact that Zayn Kamaka got kicked out of the PFL. You got kicked out of the Professional Fighters League. You had all that beef with your cousin, Ray Cooper, didn't ask for his permission ahead of time. Basically just, pissing off the star of that organization, got beat down by her cousin. He was so mad about it. When you missed weight, he could have just walked away, but he wanted to get in the ring and beat your ass, and then you missed weight again and you got kicked out. I mean, that just made me, my gut reaction there just made me laugh. Like, man, there were so many stories, especially around the Ray Cooper fight, about him detailing his struggles and how he always wanted this and all this other stuff. And it's like, did you really? Because you missed weight twice, and you seem kind of lackadaisical about it. Oh yeah.
All right, Pat, proving that the scale went undefeated for the weekend. So Ben, give me your shock and awe moment.
I mean, it was an extended moment, but I still cannot get over the Ryan Hall fight. And I know we've talked about it exhaustively here, but nonetheless, I'm just going to come back to this because MMA has offered me plenty of moments that made me jump out of my seat and say, I cannot believe that just happened. I mean, hell, at least one event a month does. I mean, Jorge Masvidal knocking out Ben Askren. I was in a bar. I was pretty drunk. And so was everybody in the room, and we all jumped in the air and said, what the... But the Ryan Hall and Darren Elkins fight, there was an extended 15-minute stretch where I repeatedly said, I cannot believe I'm seeing this happen over and over and over again. And, I mean, it's an unpredictable sport. It's a wild sport. It's going to give us unpredictable moments. But for it to have an extended period where you were saying this defies all of my expectations, that's going to stick with me for a while, regardless of what happens to the two fighters going forward. I just cannot believe I watched that fight happen. Even the third round where Hall was on his bicycle and seemed to be like his life meter was filling from the booze in the arena. He loved it. I love Ryan Hall. And he's a DC area guy. He wants to get on that DC card. So
yes, he is.
Yeah, so Ant and I know that what that's all about.
Right.
I'm telling you, he looks so good because of Elkins, though. I mean, he looks good regardless. But Elkins has a way of making fighters look like God.
Hey, and I said I want him to fight Stevens or Moicano next. Talk about two guys who can make another fighter look amazing on any given night.
That's true. That's true.
All right, fellas. Well, my shock and awe moment had to be John Howard knocking out Ray Cooper III.
That was my second choice.
Yeah. That caught me way off guard. Yeah. So, interesting little wrinkle now to the PFL welterweight tournament. So that's something to check out as it continues. I believe the next event is the 25th. Not mistaken on that.
About a little under 2 weeks. Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. So we're going to move on to some news that broke today. The Bellator Featherweight Grand Prix. Almost got my weight classes confused there for a second. But the Featherweight Grand Prix is going to be starting officially in Inglewood, California at the Forum on September 28th. So, Jay, if you can share what the matchups are, and we'll just give our quick thoughts on our hot takes from this bracket?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, first of all, it's a 16-man tournament, not an 8-man tournament like the rest of them they've been running. The belt is on the line across the board, so Patricio Pitbull will be defending his belt every step along the way. But in the first round, every fight besides the title fight is a 3-round fight, like a regular fight, except for that one title fight. Once you get into the group of 8, every fight will be 5 rounds afterwards. It's split up into Bellator 226 and 228. So September 7th and 28th, they're doing 4 matches each to wrap this tournament opening round up in a month, which, oh my God, what a good idea. So the first 4 will be Daniel Strauss versus Derek Campos. You got Pat Curran and the undefeated Adam Borix. You have Emmanuel Sanchez and Air Taiwan Claxton. And you have Sam Cecilia, who's still trucking, versus Pedro Calvario. And then on the next one, and that'll be headlined by Congo versus Bader, I believe is what that. Yes, it's headlined by Congo versus Bader that night. And then 228, it's going to be headlined by Pitbull and Juan Archuleta. So that's okay. All right, that's a title fight right there. And then the co-main event is Machida Musasi.
Right.
And then we have Darian Caldwell, who fell pretty hard, is moving up to featherweight to fight Henry Corrales, who just did a thing against Aaron Pico. Daniel Weichel is fighting Saul Rogers, which that's something I want to talk about later. AJ McKee, who's 14-0, is going to be fighting Georgia Karakhanyan.
All right, so I'll go ahead and give my surprising, not even really a hot take, but my surprise from this bracket. Darian Caldwell in the featherweight tournament was the biggest shocker to me. I guess now that he's lost his Bellator bantamweight title, lost his opportunity to win the Ryzen bantamweight title, decided, hey, might as well stop cutting the weight and see what happens. So should be interesting to see how he translates it as a featherweight in this tournament. Ben, what's your most surprising thing out of these announced matchups?
Well, other than the presence of Caldwell, because again, that says a lot about what Bellator is thinking right now, because their 8-man tournaments have all proven to take between 12 and 24 months.
Oh, yeah.
So they are taking their previous bantamweight champion and throwing him in something that is presumably going to take at least 3 months longer than that. So that says everything you need to know about what Bellator thinks about Caldwell. He needs a fresh start. Having said that, I'm super excited about this field. You know, I was excited about their welterweight field. I'm even more excited about this one. One thing that Bellator does a really good job of, other than giving UFC fighters a retirement plan and bringing along wrestlers and karate fighters from the time they're 13 years old, is they're not afraid to dare to be great. Their welterweight Grand Prix pitted 2 of their most prized undefeated prospects in the first round. It's like they drew them out of the hat. The UFC would never have put Neiman Gracie and Ed Ruth against each other in the first round of an 8-man tournament. So to see them putting McKee in there, to see them putting Adam Boric in there, makes me super excited, because I want to see how those guys do against some very proven featherweights. I just can't wait for it to start. You know, so I don't have any one thing that stands out to me other than what you already mentioned, Ant. But this is the best MMA news I've had all week.
Mm-hmm. So, Pat, I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, but what is the most surprising thing about this bracket to you?
So, well, I'm curious to see what you think I'm going to say, but I'm changing everything in my head. Why you got to say that? I'm more about to speak, man. All right. So, to me, the most surprising thing, there are 2 that I'm debating with. I'm going to go with this one, see if the other one is what you think. But the most surprising thing to me that jumps out of the page, even though he's lost 2 in a row, Aaron Pico is nowhere to be found. He's nowhere on that list. That is a little surprising. I think, again, it speaks to the credibility of the tournament that Ben was talking about. I think they saw that he lost 2 and he doesn't get a spot. I doubt the UFC would have done that. I mean, I know the UFC wouldn't have done that if they had run a tournament. They would have had somebody they've been trying to build up. They would have thrown him in there anyway. So that's the one thing that jumps out to me. And then I really like that Sanchez-Claxton matchup as well. I think that's going to be really good fight. But yeah.
Yeah, I definitely had the Pico being left out of this tournament in mind. I think that's a very good thing. He obviously should be going back to the drawing board. And I just wonder what side decided that he wasn't going to be in this tournament. Was that Team Pico saying it's time to dial it back, or was that Bellator saying it's time to dial it back, or was it a joint decision? So that's something to keep an eye on.
How would it have looked if he had beaten Boric last month?
Oh, he'd be in this tournament.
He'd be in.
Yeah.
Boric
He'd be in slotted in against Pat Curran probably.
Yep. And would Boric be in?
Oh boy.
Boric
so.
would. Yeah, probably.
I think if it was competitive, I think he would have been.
My gut, having talked to Pico, is that he legit, he has Superman ego, and I don't mean that in a negative way at all. He is a guy that has whooped ass on everybody basically from the time he was 5 years old until about 2 years ago. And he may not yet have come to grips with the fact that he's just another human being, albeit a gifted one. I think he would have wanted to be in this tournament, absolutely, if he could have. I think they probably had to actively turn down a request from him to be in this. Because he thinks he can beat anyone in the world at 145 or 155.
Yeah, he's definitely very, very sure of himself as he should be with his skill set. But obviously, time to dial things back for the sake of his career in the future. All right, gentlemen. So we're going to move on from this, and I believe it is time for the lightning round, which means I get to boss you guys around. I get to be a jerk, and I can't be stopped. I'm invincible during this segment of the show. So we're going to start with you, Jay. I would like for you to answer this question in 30 seconds. Will the UFC cut Nico Montoya for her decision loss to Juliana Pena? And go.
Since she moved up to bantamweight after the whole massive flyweight, they may be able to keep her around. She had a good first round, looked real strong, and then Pena turned it up, and then she slowed down. Given the lack of the depth in the division, she probably gets one more, but the UFC can be really vindictive. I think if Pena lost, she'd be gone and would be in Combach, but Montano could be gone and would go to Combach. I would not be surprised.
All right. Oh, look at you with time to spare. This guy, Jay, is sensational. Ben, the habitual clock offender of last week. Do you get your act together this time? Will the UFC cut Nico Montoya for her decision loss to Juliana Pena? In 30 seconds, my man, go.
No, they're not going to cut her. She's not especially highly paid. She is a weird case as a former UFC champ. They don't want to let somebody else sign her with that cachet in her pocket without knocking her down a couple more notches. Plus, she looked good in the Pena fight. I think she gets another fight or two. If she keeps winning, maybe she's a bantamweight contender. If not, they'll let her go as much more damaged goods. But she's going to stick around for now.
Oh, my goodness. Time to spare for Ben Duffy. Wow, he has really learned his lesson. Pat, it is your turn, sir. Please tell me, do you think the UFC cuts Nico Montoya? And, of course, you've got 30 seconds. Let's do it.
Nope.
Oh, my goodness. With all the time to spare. Pat is a national treasure.
The person on The Price is Right that bids $1.
This guy's sensational.
Wins, then. That person wins.
All right, so I guess I'll give my quick thoughts on this. I don't think they cut her, but I don't think she has a very long leash. I would imagine that the UFC is still not exactly happy with her, considering the way her flyweight title reign went and the back and forth controversy in that. So I think the leash got a lot shorter, but she did look pretty good in a lot of spots in that fight. All right, so
fair.
Yes, you know it, man.
Track. Nice.
That was pretty nice, wasn't it? I know. I'm nice with it. All right, gentlemen. Then the second question. Jorge Masvidal opened as a betting favorite in a potential fight against Conor McGregor. Does this fight ever happen, Pat? You have 30 seconds.
Yes. It could, or is it possible? Yes. Will it happen? I doubt it. But if McGregor wanted to fight Masvidal today, are you telling me they wouldn't put it on? It all depends on what McGregor wants. Masvidal will make a run at the strap. If he wins the belt, then yeah, I think McGregor will probably think about going up and taking it from him because I think he thinks he can handle it. So I think there is a possibility if Masvidal wins the belt or McGregor just really wants to fight him. One of those two.
And the golden child fails. just misses the time.
I had
Just
extra time for my last response, so I'm fine.
Are you
Average it out.
These are not rollover minutes, sir.
Oh, well,
Rollover
paid
seconds.
for the rollover minutes.
I think we should get 90 seconds total.
This is
man.
not cricket wireless, okay?
What are we playing chess right now? Stop the time.
All right.
Patrick got that like burner phone from the Radio Shack.
This thing sucks. It's old as hell.
Like I bought 90 seconds.
Yeah, I did.
All right, Ben. So please tell me, does Jorge Masvidal versus McGregor happen?
No. If and when McGregor comes back, it's not going to be for such a relatively high risk, low reward fight. You know, like we're talking about somebody that could conceivably hang with him on the feet and is better on the ground, because I've said it a million times, Masvidal's ground game is possibly the most underrated skill set in all of high-level mixed martial arts. So that is not the fight that happens if and when McGregor comes back.
Exactly 30 seconds, Ben. You are cutting it close. I am quite impressed, Jay. Let's see if you are just as impressive. 30 seconds. Tell me, Conor McGregor, Jorge Masvidal, what's up, my man?
To quote John Matrix from Commando, no chance. If it's all risk, no reward, what would he gain? Masvidal's number 3 welterweight. Conor's barely 1-1 at welterweight, and he doesn't want Usman. There's no way. I mean, even if Masvidal drops to 155, doesn't have any sizzle. But I want any Conor fight. Poirier, Ferguson, Cowboy, Gaethje, Iaquinta, Barbosa, Woodley, Dos Anjos, Masvidal, Lawler, Pettis, Wonderboy. Give me something. Stop tweeting. Fight.
Look at that. 29 seconds. Jay, very impressive. And while you were talking, I was trying to think of a way to incorporate another line from Commando in seamlessly. I can't, so I'll just say stick around.
All right, steam.
All I care about now is Jenny.
All right, fellas. So our last question for the lightning round. Tito Ortiz is going to take on Alberto Del Rio in Combate Americas.
Fuck this fight right up the ass with a backwards porcupine.
I fucking love this fight.
All right, so we have dissenting opinions, and I'm just gonna press the clock to run for 45 seconds. I say trash can emoji. What do you guys say?
Burning trash can emoji. Tito Ortiz, he's old, but he can still beat some people. He is a former great who is sliding gracelessly into his 40s. Alberto Del Rio and any of his 15 aliases that he's fought under in different countries was never a good fighter. This fight is bullshit.
Alberto Del Rio was WWE champion. He was world heavyweight champion.
Patrick Auger has made my point.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. Del Rio, or whatever his name is today, is the president of Cambodge. I don't know if you knew that. He's the president. It'd be like Ray Sefo going to fight Dave Hakama in WSOF.
Well,
so that's
nobody would ever do.
Versus Steve Austin.
We've gone over the 45 seconds, but I want to keep talking about this foolishness. Continue, fellas.
If Alberto Del Rio will go out in the lucha mask,
if he comes out in a limo with the driver, with a bunch of golden fireworks and a golden car like he used to, and he gets his ass kicked by Tito, I think that would be incredible. I think he might too.
Because with the mask on, I have rewatched Alberto Del Rio versus Crow Cop 10 times this week.
So many times.
I know it's a little airspace between the mask and his skull, but that head kick made a sound like Pantera's kick drum. It's like tick, tick.
I want to see Del Rio get knocked down on the way to the ring, and then have Crow Cop be in the lucha mask, step in.
Was he gonna come down out of a helicopter or something?
I support this plan completely.
Yeah, I'm all for Del Rio getting Randleman and
getting
fight.
Is that it's free.
This is a double trash fire.
If they made us pay for this fight,
I'm gonna watch
but
it,
it's free on DAZN.
Are you gonna watch it though? Hey, end of the day, are you gonna watch it?
If it took place anywhere,
that's how they get you.
If it took place anywhere within 500 miles of me, I would travel at my own expense to go see it.
I'm not going to watch it live. I can't do it. I was burned by Golden Boy.
This is how they get you, man. People are gonna watch.
Jay, taking the moral stance. You know you're gonna crumble.
I'll watch the replay later. It'll be on LFA time, so I'm gonna watch LFA over that.
All right, so I will conclude this this discussion by saying that I wish I knew that he was fighting Alberto Del Rio when Pat and I ran into Tito Ortiz at the Fighters Awards. I would have loved to get a quote from him about that. Very interesting conversation we had with him there as well. I really thought he was going to kick my ass. Okay.
I thought he was going to kick mine too. I thought I was going to spray that whatever that drink was on him because I was trying to open it with my keys and he was like, if you spray that on me, I'm going to I'll make you hurt. And I was like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. He did actually threaten you. So that
he threatened me. He straight up
I will admit to my underwear being slightly soiled after this was all over with. Okay, gentlemen. So UFC San Antonio is taking place this weekend, actually the same day as Manny Pacquiao versus Keith Thurman. So that's a big fight that we should be looking out for. But anyway, the UFC card is headlined by Rafael dos Anjos versus Leon Edwards. Gentlemen, I want your takes on the main event, the card as a whole. Pat, I'll start with you.
I think the main event is great. I think it's going to be a great fight. Leon Edwards is on a tear right now. RDA just got that Kevin Lee win, but I mean, other than that, has struggled a little bit up against the top echelon of welterweight. I think it's going to be super fun. I also love the fact, as Ben has alluded to multiple times on various podcasts, that we get to see Juan Adams versus Greg Hardy in Texas. That will be well worth everything. That alone, price of admission is paid for. I think the rest of the card is all right. I don't think it's anything. I think it's better than last week's card. I don't think it's anything that really stands out so much that I'm like, oh, got to talk about this or this. But there are some good matchups there. I think overall it's going to be a fun time.
All right. Ben, tell me, what is your sleeper pick on this card?
Well, a sleeper pick, I've got Ben Rothwell.
Go ahead.
Well, I got Ben Rothwell versus Andrei Arlovsky. Like I say, I love this sport on a scientific level, as an elevation of human endeavor, but I am down to watch a heavyweight shit show as much as the next man. This is a rematch of robbery under the Elite XC banner. Was it Elite XC or was it Affliction?
Affliction.
Okay, well, I mean, that thing was changing hands. That promotion was changing hands pretty quickly at that moment. I love the main event, honestly. I can't wait to see it. I'm still waiting for Rafael dos Anjos to lose to the guy that doesn't out-wrestle him. I know that Eddie Alvarez beat him, but that was a wild fight, and I don't know how many more times it would have played out the same if they ran it back 10 times. Generally speaking, he has hit a ceiling when people do the RDA thing better than he does. Bigger, heavier, better wrestler welterweights have done it. I want to see him versus Leon Edwards. I can't wait to see what happens there. Hardy versus Adams, enough said. I think people are going to be surprised by how easily Juan Adams wins this. It is an A-plus athlete even by NFL standards, who doesn't really know how to fight, versus a B-plus athlete who does. It's going to be quick and it's going to be ugly. I got Juan Adams big in that one.
All right. Jay, tell me, what fight are you looking forward to outside of the obvious on this card?
Well, since obviously Adams smearing Greg Hardy is going to be a fun time, I'm going to go a little lower. Irene Aldana, Raquel Pennington. Pennington's had those losses to Nunes, which that really bad loss to Nunes, and she came back and missed weight really bad against Sarandon. So this is kind of a make or break for her. And meanwhile, Aldana's on a 3-fight win streak. And if she wins, 4 in a row is not easy to do in that division, apparently. And at the same time, all of Pennington's losses have been to champions: Sarandon, Nunes, Holm, and Jessica Andrade. So she doesn't exactly lose to anybody besides the best in the division. But one thing I do want to point out is that I don't know what it is about welterweight, but every fighter in the top 10 seems to be on a crazy win streak, or was on one. Prazeres, 8-fight win streak. Ponzinibbio, 7-fight win streak. Zaleski dos Santos is ranked number 14, and he's on a 7-fight win streak with flying knees and wheel kick knockouts. So what do you got to do to get some respect? Do you have to beat dos Anjos? Is that what it's going to take for Edwards to get some respect on his name? I'm up for it.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing Leon Edwards get a bigger profile, get a bigger spotlight, and see if he can make good on that. My picks for the sleepers on this card, I'm having a hard time choosing between the two lightweight fights. James Vick versus Dan Hooker sounds gorgeous. That sounds like chaotic violence personified. And Alex Hernandez versus Francisco Trinaldo should also be a bloody mess, and I'm all there for it. So, gentlemen, before we wrap this one up, I'd like to get your buried lead for the week. Ben, I'm going to start with you. What story is not getting a whole lot of attention that you think should?
I mean, this will be the second week in a row I've offered something that just came up in the news today, but Pernell Whitaker, Sweet Pea, passed away today. It's not buried because it's new news, but coming up, being of the age I am and the era I came up in, I mean, he was my favorite fighter that was not a heavyweight. I mean, I came up in the Tyson era. Like, all I cared about all through high school and college was, what's Tyson doing and who's he fighting next? South of that, it was Pernell Whitaker and, to a lesser extent, like Meldrick Taylor and Julio Cesar Chavez. So to hear that he died tragically, unexpectedly, he hadn't been on like Skid Row and like addicted to crack or something, is just really crushing. I mean, he's everything that Floyd Mayweather should have been. A legitimately good dude who managed to be entertaining in spite of being primarily a defensive wizard, instead of being an asshole who was rich in spite of being a defensive wizard. So rest in peace, Pernell Whitaker. That's what I've got for this week.
Definitely agreed. RIP Pernell Whitaker. Pat, tell me, what's your buried lead for the week?
So my buried lead is something that's been going on for a couple weeks now, but MMA Fighting just put out a story about it, talking about a Wall Street analyst talking about Endeavor going public and how, they're not super high on it. The thing about this is that there have been some stories that have been buried for a while talking about this. Everything that analyst is talking about is not, not super new, but the real buried lead to all this, and this goes back to something I brought up earlier with Invicta not getting bought out by the UFC, is in Endeavor's paperwork that they filed that says, hey, we're going public and all this. There is specific language that states that starting from, I believe it's February of this year, I'm not sure the exact start date, but it's this year, to, I believe, 2021, 2022, the UFC can be spun off into its own separate IPO if Silver Lake and Endeavor and a couple other partners agree to it. That keeps getting buried out of nowhere. The only person I see talking about it is Paul Gift and John Nash. Those are the only two people that seem to be on top of it. But if you look at what the UFC is doing right now, if you look at the way that they're kind of branding, despite what Dana says that you never want to be part of a public company and all that, the fact that there's specific language in there makes me think that down the road there is a possibility that the UFC gets spun off and becomes a public company. That's the real story. And it's one of those things people aren't talking about it. It's crazy. Everyone wants to talk about Endeavor. That's great, but the fact that UFC could be a public company in 2 years is nuts. So that's my buried lead.
Wow, that's that's a earth shatterer right there. So definitely I definitely can expect you to do some more digging into this one, as you are the Sherdog resident business guy. So I'm looking forward to your work on that note. Jay, please tell me, what's your buried lead for the week?
So the thing that Pat was talking about, I guess if I have to pick one, I would have picked one, but he I scooped one of his, he scooped one of mine. That PFL threw the dude through. Whoa, they threw him out of the company. But since that's all moved on, it's that the UFC is bringing back Brandon Baby, the Baby Assassin Baby, Clown Baby, whatever his nickname is today, Brandon Moreno, back at flyweight. And they're signing Askar Askarov, a guy from ACB, I believe is an ACB, a dynamic flyweight finisher, who's a really exciting prospect. They're signing flyweights again. Sherdog, we officially called the big release when they were letting everybody and their brother go. We called it the Great Flyweight Purge. What do we call it? What do we call the reverse of that? What do we call it when they start signing guys again to rebuild the division?
The Great Flyweight Surge.
Probably the Great Flyweight Surge. Now, they said they weren't getting rid of the division, which is well and good, but when they cut down to like 12 guys and a couple are going to bantamweight, you kind of figure that out. Are they rebuilding flyweight? Is this because they wouldn't just sign these guys out of nowhere? Baby Assassin Baby got one win in LFA, looked great, and they brought him back. Is that Cejudo effect? Is it whatever's going on? I think it's a good sign for flyweight.
Definitely a good sign for flyweight, and a story that probably should be getting some more attention. So my buried lead of the week, for some strange reason, the Chinese government has decided that MMA fighters cannot have tattoos. So they've been getting around this by wearing rash guards and sleeves and whatnot and tape to cover over the tattoos. But a lot of promoters are just saying the hell with this, and they're just not signing guys with tattoos. Apparently, this was from a tweet from Phuket Top Team that first mentioned this. So also just wondering, what does this do for the UFC's entrance into China as they're trying to make waves in there? Does that affect the UFC roster? Does the UFC only book people without tattoos? Because that's like 4 people on the roster. So very strange ruling, and just some really bizarre consequences that could potentially affect the UFC and other major brands as they try to do global expansion. All right, so that is going to wrap things up for Off the Chain. I do want to say before we conclude this episode that Ben and Pat will be in San Antonio covering the fight night live from the ground. So expect a lot of good coverage from those two on Sherdog.com. I'm very much looking forward to some media day interviews, seeing posts and preview shows and all that good stuff. So very, 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 very excited to see what the dynamic duo of Texas have to offer for us. Now, Ben, please tell me, where can the people find you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter at Benjamin Duffy, or you can find me on the front page of Sherdog from just the features drop-down menu. I'm right on there. My name is Ben Duffy. I'm an editor and writer at Sherdog.com, and as Ant has said, Pat and I will be at UFC on ESPN4 in San Antonio this coming weekend. So look out for lots of great coverage from a sneaky good card in the Lone Star State.
All right. So the resident stat man, Jay Pettry, please tell the people where they can find you.
If you want to use Twitter after what happened today, you can still find me on Twitter at Jay Pettry, but I respect you if you decide to move on for all the design changes. You can find me at Sherdog.com. I'm in the features column, just in the drop down with these gentlemen here. I had a couple stat pieces go out earlier about Bellator 224 and LFA 71 and the strange situation that happened with that card, where everything was rearranged the day before the event. And I think today or tomorrow, my stat piece that I touched on earlier about the UFC Sacramento card will be going up on Sherdog. I'll be covering these upcoming events going forward, and I have a feature I'm putting together. I can't say much about it yet, but it's going to be real fun. So look forward to that in I don't know when yet, but sometime in the near future.
All right. So I'm highly anticipating this as well. So I am Ant Walker. You can find me on Twitter at Ant Walker MMA. So, of course, you can also find my work on the drop-down features menu. The Trenches with myself and Jason Burgos, the weekly live chat, will be on the YouTube channel pretty soon there. So take a look for that. And, of course, my regular post-fight columns, Ask Ant and The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, in regular rotation there. So you know what you got to do, everyone. You must stay beautiful. You must stay positive. You must agree with me at all times, just like Pat, and remain right. And while you're being right, while you're agreeing with me, you must remain sexy. I will see you when I see you. Peace.